Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to A Russian Opinion. My name is Stan, and today we have Joseph. Joseph is an American who moved with his Russian wife to Moscow, Russia. He has his own channel where he actually shows you exactly how life is in 2022 in Moscow, Russia. So if you want to check it out, go and check out the link below. That's going to be in the description. Subscribe, comment, do whatever you wish. And Joseph, thank you very much for coming on this channel today. Thank you very much. And just in general, hi.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Joseph, very, very simple. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What did you study? Where did you work? Doesn't have to be names, but maybe an industry. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I'm from Florida, small town Florida, Tallahassee. And I actually went to film school in New York at New York University and worked in Hollywood, California for a few years. But then as a mid-20s guy, my life got sidetracked and I got married and had kids and actually opened up a child care, and I managed that for almost 2 decades. And then I married a Russian woman, and now I'm here in Moscow, Russia.
Wow. What made you get into the childcare business? That's just out of curiosity.
Well, I mean, I always liked film and entertainment, so first I was aiming for that. But then when I had my first child, it kind of changed things for me, and I was inspired to really be a great dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I opened up a business that would allow me to do that and focus on that.
Okay, 20 years. That's a lot of years of childcare. Interesting.
Yeah, we started in 2004,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still going now. I'm managing it online, as a smaller capacity.
Okay, no, good. That's definitely an accomplishment. So, how many kids do you have?
5. One of them is not biologically mine. It is
Mhm.
my Russian wife's from a previous marriage.
Okay, and how many of you are here in Moscow?
All of us.
All of you.
All of us. Yeah.
So, all right. So obviously, some of those kids are older, so they have to adjust to life in Russia. Did you start teaching them Russian, or did your wife start teaching them Russian when you were in America, or are they learning now? How's that work?
Well, yeah, they were learning it a little bit as children. And then my oldest, who is now 22, he came over here about 3 years ago to go to university because it was cheaper. So he's really been immersed in the language. The 2 other kids are 18, and they just started university, so they've been practicing Russian for about 4 years. My wife's child was living here for the first 8 years of his life. And then the 2 little ones that are 7 and 4, of course, they had a Russian mom their whole life, so they're always speaking Russian.
Okay, so how has it been for your older children, the adjustment to an entirely different culture, an entirely different city and weather patterns and everything? I mean, how's it been for them?
So weather-wise, my 22-year-old does not like it at all. He admits that if he ever moves back to America, he will miss the big city life and the convenience of having everything at your fingertips. But he does not like the cold, and he still has this mental block. He feels like he's an American and he should be in America. My wife's 18-year-old teenager who spent, his first 8 years here and then moved to America, he has this feeling like, I'm cool, America's cool, I want to go back to America. But the rest of us are enjoying it here in Russia a lot. So.
Okay, so what made you actually move? What was that choice, or what was that scenario where you actually said, you know what, that's it, I'm moving to Russia, and these are the reasons why, and I'm perfectly fine with it? Like, what was the driver?
Well, the first driver was financial, to be honest, because I was here vacationing about 3 years ago, and we would come for a month at a time, about every 2 years, to see my wife's mother and let my wife go home, quote, home. And I realized with all these kids and managing my business with the exchange rate, when I was here for a month, I was actually saving money because the cost of living was so different. And I was a little freaked out because of the news the first time I came here. But over the years, vacationing for a month at a time, I was like, where's the problem? what's wrong with this place? What am I scared of? You know, and living here, even though it was still a vacation for a month, and I wasn't like working, it was great. And I remember telling her on our last vacation, you know, and I think I could live here. And of course, I knew that she really wanted to go back. You know, she missed home.
Hmm.
She was excited about going to America when we first got married. But after about 6 months, she was kind of getting worn out of always speaking English. And then about 3 years later, she was hating America just because she missed her country, not because necessarily there's something wrong with America. So yeah, that's how it happened. And of course, it helps that I mean, I'm not going to like talk very badly about America, but I do think, as I've said in other interviews, America is leaning away from Christianity, and I think Russia is leaning towards Christianity. And we're a Christian family, so that's a big plus for us. I think these are both strong Christian nations. I think they've got a lot of good things about them, but I just think that one is leaning in a direction that's better for my family.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with you saying this, and there are some people that might take not offense to it, but they'll say, "Oh, you're just crapping on one country," and you're saying, "Well, it's true, it's realistic. You'll agree with me as an American, especially as a Christian American, that America has lost its way when it comes to religion, when it comes to family values, and." I'm generalizing here because there are obviously people in the U.S. that want family values, that want traditional marriage, that actually want their kids to be kids and not to be and not have them fed trans propaganda in school, not have it normalized that a drag queen can come to a church and then recite stories for some odd reason. There are many people like that in the U.S., and you're right. America decided, for whatever reason, decided to head in that direction, and Russia is not going there. And just recently, there was a law that was signed in, and now that propaganda is entirely banned. So, in essence, I think the question some YouTubers are asking is that, well, what if we want to criticize that propaganda? Are we allowed to do this, or like, are we still going to get a fine for it? That's, I think, the only question that we're having at the moment. But unfortunately, it's true. Like, many people have said this. Oh, the reason why they're doing it is population control, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't understand families, parents who take their kids to a church where there's a guy dressed as a woman. Clearly, there's something off.
Right.
And he's reciting a kid's story and dancing around like a clown, saying, "Wouldn't it cool to be me?"
Right.
Why are the parents going along with this?
Right.
That's
right.
the question I've been asking.
Yeah. I don't understand. I don't think it'll stay this way, though. I think that it's getting pushed by, I would guess, the left. And I think that eventually it'll snap. I think that the majority of American families will, whether it be in 2 years or whether it be in 20 years, will eventually say, no, we're not doing this anymore. So maybe something like that happened in Russia at some point, and that's why Russia is going the way it is now in a positive way. I'm not sure. I don't really know Russian history.
Well, I mean, we were very much like in the 90s, a lot of stuff was, not really written in law. I mean, if we're talking about absolute freedom, where you don't even face consequences for doing something, that was the 90s, where you would steal, you would rob. There was lots of crime, a lot of problems. So technically speaking, I mean, bad people were free to do things, had the freedom to do bad things, and good people had the freedom to do good things. Now, when a society progresses, and when society wants to live when people want to live in a safer society, they want these freedoms curbed so that bad people can't do bad things anymore. That's where laws come into place, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there was a lot of very strict laws, like in the Soviet Union, when it comes to having your own business. Mm-hmm. For example, that was illegal. In general, there's a law against it. Then we moved into the 90s where like, hey, do what you want. And then the country went to hell. Finally, we're getting out of it. through the hard work of people that stayed and people that invested money, et cetera, et cetera. But now some freedoms are getting curbed when, in essence, I think that in some ways it's a good thing, because I want my children to live in a normal, well, I have one child for now. I want her to live in a normal society where women are valued for being women and men are valued for being men, and the society is not trying to transform one sex into the other. But I mean, that's my opinion. So, all right, getting back on track, because we got off track.
Right.
What was the first thing when you first came to Russia? What was the first thing that really stood out? Do you remember?
First thing that really stood out. It's superficial, but I remember thinking it's really dark and it's really crowded. Because I came in Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I actually came with my father. It's funny because on the plane ride over from London to Moscow, we just happened to pick up a Time magazine article, and it was, it's a Western publication, and it was saying all these bad things about Russia and they're spying on you and all this stuff. It was just funny because it was our first time going, and it made us paranoid. And I showed it to him, and he whispered to me on the plane, "I wouldn't have come here." So we spent our first trip afraid to say anything and kind of walking around nervous. Of course, we had no idea. There was nothing to be nervous about. But you spend, 30 or 40 years of your life in a place that says that Russia's a place with, just a bunch of big, strong, mean guys living in the cold dark, wanting to do bad things, And you come over here and you're a little afraid. So, I mean, that was the feeling I remember very acutely on my first trip. But it's funny because the whole trip, nothing like that happened. It was all nice, warm families and great events for me to go to because I was dating a woman and she wanted to show me around and introduce me to her friends and family and church members, and it was great.
Okay, so that's an interesting first impression. I mean, I've had lots of friends from the U.S. and acquaintances, actually, more like acquaintances, that came over to Russia, especially during the World Cup, and they would post on their social media going, "Wow, we didn't know this was a normal place with normal people." So it's normal. I mean, how? And this is an interesting question. It relates to the previous one. Now that you are in Russia, the things that you read on the news about Russia in Western publications, I mean, how much of that can you honestly say is true and how much of that is false when it comes to, how bad it is to live here and how everything is totalitarian and et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I mean, I barely do the news now from the West as of about 2 months ago. I just kind of I was like, forget it, man. Because it's funny, because being over here, you can read the news on both sides, and it's different. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's a flat out lie, but I think that they will take things and they will adjust it and they will bend it. Mm-hmm. And they'll make you think, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? For example, like 10 years ago in America, there was an article that the middle class is shrinking. And that sounds terrible. But at the time, the reality was the middle class was doing so well, they were moving out of the middle class. Mm-hmm. So that's just an example of how you can take a news story. You can just make it sound really bad. And, that's what I see. I see that the West is twisting things all the time. And I don't know why that is. I have some ideas, but I don't want to say it because I don't want to, spread rumors.
You're free to say and free not to say whatever you want on my channel, so that's perfectly fine if you wish or you don't wish to say it. But I mean, the reason, if someone flat out lies, just an absolute lie, that's going to be very easy to see as a lie and very easy to break down and break apart and laugh at. Right. If something is very difficult and it requires effort to break down, then most people are not even going to try, in my opinion, or they're too busy because they have so many other things to do in their life. So when you take something and you twist it just a little bit, but enough to make it sound very negative, it's very easy to accept it as truth because at some point you don't even want to dissect it. You don't have the time or the necessary discipline to even do something, because it's not easy.
Right.
So and obviously where countries are in competition with each other, the world is finite. It's not like expanding constantly, right? So naturally speaking, it's the us against or me against you type of mentality in some areas, unfortunately still. So that's why this kind of propaganda. I mean, imagine if there was no anti-Russian propaganda, and America was moving further and further into that liberal hellhole of brainwashing kids with alphabet people propaganda. Imagine that was happening, and Russia was moving toward. How many Christian families from the U.S. would say, you know what, I'm going to Russia. Bye bye. I want my kids to be normal. Like,
right. I think that's starting to happen. I totally agree. And you're right. I mean, countries are in competition with each other. I mean, if I were to be in defense of the U.S., I think U.S. people that are in charge that have pure hearts, I think their fear or their concern has been the same since the end of World War II. I think they feel like the world almost got really bad, and now the U.S. has the power. And even if they have to be a little bit bad, the world will be safer if the U.S. does whatever it has to do to stay in power. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I have a different theory. My theory is, I think, maybe a little bit more simple. Or maybe more complicated, I don't know. My theory is that because the world is finite and resources are finite, the U.S. has reached the top in many, years ago, actually. And in certain areas, it has been going down in this case. But the only way to stay on top in a finite area, okay, is either invent something entirely new, entirely like revolutionary, right? As blue ocean, red ocean, as they call it in business, right? Which is not always easy. Or you keep the competitors down, which in this case may be much easier than reinventing or inventing something entirely new. It's basically, I'm on top and I want to keep everyone else down to remain on top.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. We're just speculating here, and I'm not, I don't want to say anything. Like, I love both countries, So, I mean, I appreciate America a lot. I appreciate Russia a lot. So, this is just a good place for me to be right now.
All right. So, what thing is, what's difficult for you to get used to here?
So probably the cold. Definitely.
Because you're from Florida.
I just posted a video with my son where we tried to go ice skating and skiing, and it is so cold, And I'm from Florida, and it's just like, it's just burning my face, and my toes are like going numb. And people are telling me, they're commenting, I need a better jacket. Maybe I need a better jacket. They're saying I'll get used to it. But I'm from Florida, so it is a big extreme. I think I still prefer it because I always say, if it's cold, you can put on a jacket. If it's too hot, you can't take your skin off.
Yeah, I say the same thing. I say the exact same thing to my wife.
Yeah. I thought I would miss food. I don't really miss food that much, because every country has their own food. So I'm going in the store, and I can't buy like brands that I'm used to. The brands are all different. When I first got here, there were some brands that I knew, and then the sanctions happened like a week later, and some of the brands I knew started to disappear. It's not a problem because other brands popped up. But I think now that I've been here for almost a year, if I didn't live here in the future, I think I would miss Russian food more than I would miss American food.
Why?
I just think that the food, because I'm older and I'm trying to be healthy, I feel like the food by and large is more natural, if that makes sense. And I don't know, man. I mean, like if you go to like a stereotypical place like Moo, like all the varieties there are pretty tasty and not that bad for you, comparatively speaking. If I went to an American type place like that in America, the food will be very tasty, but I think most of it will not be so good for you, if that makes sense.
No, because I mean, corporations have found out that sweet, salty, and fat is what our brain and stomachs like. Not necessarily in the long term, right?
Right.
And but as far as things like fruits, I mean, vegetables, do you find the food here that you find in a regular supermarket? Okay, do you find it has more taste, the same, less taste?
For fresh food, I haven't noticed a difference. I have noticed that, like with produce in Russia, it I might not have anything I want anytime.
Hmm.
So in Florida, because that's a warm weather place, perhaps, any time of the year I can get any fruit or vegetable I want. In Russia, I might go a month without being able to get cherries or peppers, for example. And so I don't know if that's an America-Russia thing. It might be more of a warm weather place versus a cold weather place thing.
Well, the reason why I ask is that many Russians that I speak with and who speak on my channel, for example, those who don't as well, all notice the same thing, that regular stuff like tomatoes, cucumbers, other types of food, produce, are tastier, not just here, but in some areas in Europe as well, than in North America, because North America has mass production practices in place that focus on quantity rather than quality, and that focus on the perfect look, that waxy apple look, rather than that apple that looks like it's got worms in it. It may, but it's hella tasty. You know what I mean?
I heard that. Why do you think that would be? You think because it's lazy or cheap, or do you think it's because the American population grew, maybe not now, but so much in the past that they had to do that?
No, I think farmers are just concentrating on profits because it makes sense in this case, because companies want to expand continuously. I mean, if anyone works in any company, like forget even a business, we human beings just want for some reason to expand and procreate and everything like that, right?
Right.
Which is why some political groups, some left-leaning groups, right-leaning groups, are always like, they don't always stay in one area and say, we're happy with 10 people. No, they try and get more and more people on board. Just like with the alphabet people propaganda, it's normal. We're human beings. When we have a point of view, we want other people to have the same point of view. And the same thing comes to business. And in this case, this is my opinion, that it's basically just good business, because a person who can get that red, good-looking tomato, right? Because we choose with our eyes first, right? All year long, then that farmer will probably have more profit rather than if he's only producing maybe not the best quality, but the best tasting tomato for 3-4 months. I think it's just business in this case.
So how does Russia or Europe combat that problem? How would it not be a problem over here?
How they do this, I'm not an expert in this field.
Right.
I wouldn't be able. I can give a very amateur answer, but I don't think it's going to be a good answer in this case. So what I think the way they do it is imported from other nations. Like, for example, in the winter, I believe you'll see certain types of produce made in Russia disappear from shelves, and then they're replaced with produce from the south, from like Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, those areas, Armenia, stuff like that. So I think that's how it's being done. Personally, I prefer taste over quantity in this case. So,
I mean, perhaps the Russian culture, European culture is raised at birth with an idea of being more health conscious. And so the people that buy this stuff over here, the Russian European customers, would not be so easily fooled by just beautiful looking fruit and vegetables. But that's just a guess.
Maybe. It is a guess. Oh, we're guessing here. It's a basic conversation in this case. All right. Just what does your family back in the U.S., what do they think about you moving to Russia, especially now during this time? It's not your fault that a week after you moved here, we had the special military operation or war start. But I mean, you're here. Your family is Russian as well. What's your family back home say?
Well, that's a good question. you know how families go. We had a little argument, so we haven't been talking that much lately.
Mm.
And you know, I do know they're watching my channel. I bet they are very concerned. And who wouldn't be? I mean, it's, you don't want to be in a world where all this political stuff is going on. And like you said, this was not my choosing. I mean, we came here February 16th, and then all this stuff happened. Had it happened sooner, we probably wouldn't have come. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not grateful that I'm here. I am grateful that I'm here, and everything's great. But the younger Joseph Rose, a year ago, if this had happened and hadn't moved yet, would have just played it safe and not moved. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't really know what life is like to this level over here. Yeah, so it's interesting that all this happened, and as a Christian, I just say, it's God, it's part of His plan, for me to be here and see what I'm seeing, and it's why I started the channel. One of the reasons why, because I realized, well, I'm not leaving. I'm an American in Russia, and this is in the news now, and America, the West, they don't know what life in Russia is really like. So I'm not going to get political, but I'm just going to tell, regular people in the West, if they'll listen, this is regular life here. And it's almost exactly like your life. It's like an alternate reality, like in a Marvel movie, you could say, where things are a little off, but they're still the same. And they're not a little off in a bad way, they're just different.
Yeah, because you're no longer next to palm trees, you're next to birch trees, and that does make a difference. Even like the forest in Canada, you can clearly tell it's different from at least the forest here. The forest in Canada where I lived and the forest where I'm living now. And I clearly, when I was driving on any road in the area when I lived in Canada, and that particular area, I didn't have this kind of same attachment to a simple forest. And when I came here, I was like, this is home. This is something I recognize. This is something I know. And I'm not saying one is better than the other.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that you get this feeling that something is odd, like I was when I was over there. I'm like, this is not my forest. This is something different. These pine trees are different. The thickness of it is different, et cetera, et cetera. With buildings, with roads, with signs, I mean, you get this feeling every day.
With language.
Yeah.
Or even like the post office. It's different, but I still know, I still see it and think, I think that's a post office,
Why? Because people are walking out of there really pissed off?
Well, no, just the emblem and the words and just the structure of the whole thing. Yeah. For walking up to a post office and thinking, I think that's a post office,
Yeah. All right, so a quick question about the U.S. then. Because, again, this is going to be translated by Yandex Translator. We'll see how good of a job it does. Apparently, they've updated the algorithm. But Russians, and you probably have already experienced this to some effect, Russians, not all, but some or many, believe that once you actually move to the United States or Canada for the whatever, instantly you become a much more free person. Instantly, you get all of this opportunity open to you. Okay? I mean, people think that there is no poverty in the U.S. Now, I'm not asking you to shit on your country. There's poverty in Russia. There's poverty in the U.S. There's poverty in Canada. Anyone who's been to the Appalachia region or West Virginia, for the matter, can see that there's poverty in the U.S.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, have you had to deal with those kinds of people? Have they asked you any of those questions? What have you told them? Do you have anything to say about that?